Screams and wails echoed through the halls of the Palatium. "The Emperor has been slain!" Servants shouted the words as they fled, scattering through corridors and doorways, searching for somewhere, anywhere to hide. Sandals slapped against marble floors. Doors were thrown open, then slammed shut again. The sound carried, rising and falling like a storm trapped within the walls. A number of Praetorian soldiers, led by Cassius had already entered the complex. They moved with purpose now, seeking out members of the imperial household, members like Claudius. After hours in the imperial box at the Circus Maximus, choking on the dust kicked up by the racing chariots, Claudius had excused himself. There was always food laid out in the Palatium, and he had gone in search of it, leaving the noise and spectacle behind. But as he sat alone upon a dining couch, idly picking at the plate set before him, the shouting outside the palace walls began to bleed into the rooms within. "The Emperor's German bodyguard, they've taken to the streets," the shouting revealed. "They're killing men. They think it was a plot." The words came in fragments, carried by servants rushing past the open doors, each voice more frantic than the last. "A senator," came another voice, "just come from sacrifice, had blood on his toga. They thought it was the Emperor's blood, and they cut off his head." Claudius listened, his heart beginning to pound. So it had come to this. Caligula's enemies had made their move. But if the Praetorians were inside the palace, and the Germans were loosed upon the streets, then it was not over. It had only just begun. Grabbing his cane, Claudius heaved himself to his feet so quickly he sent the tray of food clattering to the floor. He did not stop to look at it. Instead, he moved, faster than he had in years, through the corridors of the Palatium, joining the servants in their frantic search for somewhere to hide. His wife, Messalina, and his daughters, Antonia and Octavia, were not here. They had left the Palatium earlier in the day to visit the wife of Herod Agrippa at his rented villa. They were safe. Claudius was not. Then more shouting. Louder now, closer. Servants came rushing down from the upper floors, their voices breaking as they cried out, "They've murdered the Empress Caesonia, and they killed her child too." The words struck Claudius where he stood. For a moment he could not move. Then his hands began to tremble, and his knees weakened beneath him. The Palatium was no longer chaos. It was a slaughter. He tried to hurry, tried to force his body forward, but his club foot betrayed him. The strength left his legs, and the speed he needed would not come. There was nowhere left to run. Desperate, Claudius lurched toward the wall and pulled himself behind a heavy drape, pressing his body into the shadow as though he might disappear within it. As doors slammed shut in the distance, the room fell into silence. Claudius held his breath, fearing even the pounding of his own heart might betray him. Then came the sound of Caligula striking the floor, not in rhythm, not in formation. Claudius realized they were not being led. They had been let loose. Squeezing his eyes shut behind the drape, Claudius heard the crash of objects being thrown aside as the soldiers tore through the room, searching. Closer. Then the drape was ripped away. Light flooded in. Claudius dropped instantly to his knees at the soldier's feet, his hands clasped together. "Spare me," he cried. "I had no part in this, I swear it." For a moment there was no answer. Claudius dared to look up. The soldier, standing over him, was Gratus. "I found him," Gratus hollered to the men searching the rooms. The crashing ceased at once. Within moments Claudius found himself surrounded by Praetorians. "Up," Gratus said, reaching down and pulling him roughly to his feet. "You're coming with us." Claudius did not resist. What choice did he have? Raising their shields, the Praetorians closed in around him, forming a wall of bronze and leather. Then, as one, they began to move out through the halls of the Palatium and into the chaos beyond. Claudius sat upon a seat hastily placed on the rostra within the Castra Praetoria, the Praetorian camp built just beyond the city by his one-time brother-in-law, Sejanus. He sat rigidly, torn between fear and exhaustion, his hands trembling slightly in his lap, as the Praetorians gathered below for a general assembly. But what was to become of him? After leaving the Palatium, surrounded by raised shields, the soldiers had lifted Claudius onto a litter and carried him through the streets of Rome. Not in secrecy, but in full view. They marched with weapons drawn, clearing a path through the chaos as they bore him aloft. Claudius looked down upon the faces in the crowd as they passed. Some stared in silence. Others looked on with something like pity, believing he was being taken to his death. And Claudius feared the same. At last, when all had gathered within the Castra Praetoria, Gratus stepped forward onto the rostra and took his place beside him. "Hail Caesar!" he shouted. Claudius looked up at him, bewildered. He was no Caesar. He was a Claudian, one who had never been adopted by Augustus, or Tiberius, or even Gaius. But the soldiers did not care. Raising their gladi along with their voices, they shouted as one, "Hail Caesar! Hail Caesar! Hail Caesar!" When the salute ended and the soldiers stood once more at attention, Claudius's eyes turned slowly to Gratus. I am to be emperor?" he stuttered, his voice hesitant. "Why me?" Gratus looked down at him where he sat. "Because you are the brother of Germanicus," he said, "and the Praetorian Guard needs an emperor to protect. Otherwise we'll be sent off to the provinces, forced to live like common soldiers for a quarter of the pay." "But surely there are others more qualified," Claudius stammered, "men with actual military experience." Gratus shook his head. "We have chosen you. You are already of the imperial house." "Livilla's husband," Claudius retorted. "Marcus Vinicius. He's a member of the imperial family too." Gratus smirked. "Only by marriage," he said. "And that member of the imperial house is, at this very moment, standing in the Senate, trying to have himself declared emperor, and his nephew, Vinicianus, named as his heir." He leaned slightly closer. "But the Senate does not yet know that the next emperor has already been chosen." Claudius nodded. "And I have no say in the matter, it seems." "It is for your own good," Gratus replied. "Whomever the Senate chooses, civil war will follow. Appius Silanus is already pressing his own claim against Marcus Vinicius, and whichever man emerges the victor, do you think he will leave a rival alive, a claimant from the previous regime?" Then Gratus shrugged, helping Claudius to his feet. "Civil wars are won by soldiers anyway, and that's what we are." After being escorted down from the rostra and into the safety of the barracks, Claudius discovered his friend, King Herod Agrippa, waiting for him. Claudius gasped, "Messalina and the girls." "Safe," Herod Agrippa assured him. "But for how long depends on tonight." Then Herod drew Claudius down into a seated position. "They killed Gaius," he said, voice low. "But they had no plan for what came after. Now Vinicius and Silanus press their claims in the Senate, while Gaius Sabinus and Cassius Chaerea argue for a complete restoration of the Republic." He paused. "And that is what Chaerea was doing in the Palatium, restoring the Republic by slaughtering every member of the imperial house." Claudius stared at him. "Caesonia died bravely," Agrippa continued. "She offered her neck and urged him to be quick. After that, Chaerea dashed the child's head against the wall. A brief silence. And he was looking for you next. Herod Agrippa took a breath, then continued. If Chaerea and Sabinus succeed in restoring the Republic tonight, you will not live beyond tomorrow, you or your family. Then again, Herod's eyes narrowed. Neither will Vinicius nor Vinicianus. That is why they fight to become emperors, because tomorrow they may be nothing more than members of the imperial house, hunted down and executed. He held Claudius's gaze. They are your allies in this. Let me talk to them. Let me negotiate a way through. They have as much to lose by a restoration of the Republic as you, their lives. Because when the knives come out in the name of the Republic, they will not leave a single trace behind. Gripping his cane in a trembling hand, Claudius, accompanied by Messalina, supported by King Herod Agrippa, and surrounded by a cohort of Praetorian soldiers, limped slowly into the Curia Julia, where the Senate awaited him. While still at the Castra Praetoria, after Herod Agrippa departed, 2 representatives of the Senate had appeared, ordering Claudius to renounce the imperial throne and accusing him of seizing it by military force rather than receiving it by senatorial decree. But for the 2 delegates, the meeting did not go as planned. No sooner had they spoken their demands than the Praetorians moved in, slowly, deliberately, surrounding them with drawn weapons. The tone shifted at once. The delegates quickly amended their request, now asking politely that Claudius appear before the Senate, to be properly ratified in his new title. Hobbling toward the imperial seat, set between the vacant chairs of the consuls, Claudius moved through the silence, the sound of the soldiers' caligae against the marble, the only thing that filled the Curia Julia. No one spoke. Claudius eased himself down into the curule chair. Then the negotiations began. Gaius Sabinus, who favoured a restoration of the old republic, was not present, and so Cassius Chaerea, though not a senator, spoke first. He promised the assembly that a 4th Caesar would be no different from those who had come before. Treason trials, sexual depravity. It was time, he argued, for Rome to be rid of the imperial system, to return to the sanity of a republic where law was debated in the Senate, not handed down by an emperor. Then Marcus Vinicius stepped forward, his nephew and adopted son Vinicianus at his side, the first man to press a claim to the title of emperor. He inclined his head respectfully toward Claudius, the uncle of Livilla, his exiled wife. Vinicius turned and addressed the Senate. He would withdraw his name from consideration. He had only put it forward, he explained, because he believed the Praetorians had already killed every other viable candidate. Now, seeing that Claudius and his family still lived, Marcus Vinicius was content to remain what he was, a Roman senator. Claudius watched in silence as Vinicius and Vinicianus returned to their seats. Then Appius Silanus, the next would-be emperor, rose. He too withdrew his name, deferring to the decision already made by the Praetorian Guard. And so, without speaking a word in his own defense, Claudius was ratified as Emperor of Rome, a golden laurel wreath placed upon his head by Gratus before the Senate. With the restoration of the Republic failed, Chaerea, Vinicius, and Vinicianus were taken into custody for the assassination of the Emperor Gaius. All eyes turned to Claudius. The new emperor was expected to pass his first judgment. Claudius rose. "Where is Gaius Sabinus?" he asked. "Dead," Gratus responded. "He took his own life." Claudius nodded once. "I see. Sabinus dealt in death when passing judgment on others, but when it was his own life at stake, He chose the coward's escape. Then he turned to Cassius Chaerea. For the deaths of the Emperor Gaius, the Empress Caesonia, and their daughter Julia Drusilla, all of whom you were sworn to protect, I sentence you to death. Chaerea was seized at once and marched from the Curia Julia by Praetorian soldiers. Nearby, Vinicius and Vinicianus stood in silence, waiting for their judgment in the assassination of Caligula. But Claudius did not look at them. He turned away and moved back to his seat. Easing himself down, he addressed the chamber. As I have been made emperor, for good or for ill, I will at once exercise the imperial prerogative of declaring a general amnesty. All who were exiled under the reign of my mad nephew are to be immediately recalled to Rome. Then, without another word, Claudius heaved himself to his feet and limped from the Curia Julia. A cohort of Praetorian soldiers followed close behind. Vinicius and Vinicianus remained where they stood, uncondemned and unmistakably spared, amid a senate that had fallen utterly silent.